Heartbreak has a strange way of convincing you that your value depends on someone else's choices. The moment a man walks away betrays your trust or makes you feel like you were never enough. Your first instinct is often to chase answers. You want him to explain why he changed. You want him to understand how deeply he hurt you. You replay every conversation, every promise, every memory, hoping that if you just say the right words, he'll suddenly realize what he lost. But here's the painful truth that most people never hear. Every minute you spend chasing closure is another minute you give away your power. Think about it. When you're constantly texting, calling, checking his social media, asking mutual friends about him, or trying to prove that you're worth loving, who holds the power? It's not you. Without realizing it, you've handed him control over your emotions. Your happiness rises and falls depending on whether he responds, whether he watches your story, whether he reaches out, or whether he seems to care. That's not revenge. That's emotional dependence. The hardest lesson after being hurt is accepting that not every wound will receive an explanation. Some people don't leave because you failed. Some people leave because they were never capable of giving the love they promised. Others choose selfishness over loyalty. And some simply stop appreciating what they already had. None of those reasons become easier to accept, but chasing them rarely changes the outcome. The moment you stop demanding answers is the moment something remarkable begins to happen. Instead of asking, why wasn't I enough? You begin asking, why am I allowing someone else's decision to define my worth? That single question changes everything. Many people believe revenge means making someone jealous, hurting them back, or finding ways to make them suffer. But those actions still revolve around the person who hurt you. They still make him the center of your life. Real power begins when he is no longer the main character in your story. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing you haven't checked your phone to see if he texted. Imagine going through your day without wondering what he's doing or who he's with. Imagine laughing again, sleeping peacefully, making plans for yourself, and rediscovering the person you were before pain convinced you that you were broken. That is the beginning of real revenge. Not because he suffers, but because you finally stop suffering under the weight of his choices. When someone hurts you, they often expect you to react. They expect anger, tears, endless messages, emotional confrontations, or desperate attempts to fix what they broke. They know how to respond to those reactions because they keep the emotional connection alive. But when you quietly step away and begin rebuilding yourself, something shifts. You become unpredictable. You become unavailable for emotional manipulation. Most importantly, you begin healing. Healing doesn't happen because he apologizes. Healing happens because you decide your peace is worth more than another conversation that changes nothing. The strongest people are not those who never cry. They are the ones who eventually wipe away their tears and choose themselves, even when it hurts. Today, make one decision that your future self will thank you for. Stop chasing closure and start reclaiming your power. Once you stop chasing closure, something unexpected happens. The noise begins to fade. The endless urge to explain yourself becomes weaker. And that is where one of the most powerful forms of revenge begins. Not through anger, not through insults, and certainly not through trying to prove your worth, but through silence. Not the kind of silence that is meant to punish someone, but the kind that comes from deciding your peace is more valuable than another exhausting conversation. Many people misunderstand silence. They think it is weakness, surrender, or giving up. But true silence is none of those things. It is emotional discipline. It is the decision to stop arguing with someone who has already shown you who they are. It is refusing to spend another day convincing someone to value what they willingly risk losing. When someone hurts you, they often expect a reaction. They expect angry messages in the middle of the night. They expect emotional paragraphs explaining how devastated you are. They expect you to demand answers, seek explanations, or fight for another chance. Those reactions are predictable because they reassure them that they still occupy your thoughts. Even negative attention is still attention. But silence changes the entire dynamic. When you stop explaining yourself, stop defending your value, and stop responding to every emotional impulse, you take away something they may have unconsciously depended on, your constant availability. Suddenly, they don't know what you're thinking. They don't know whether you've moved on. They don't know whether you're crying or smiling. The story they expected to control is no longer theirs to read. More importantly, silence isn't for confusing him. It's for healing you. Every conversation that reopens old wounds delays your recovery. Every time you read old messages, check his profile, or search for signs that he misses you, you reopen a chapter that desperately needs to close. Healing cannot grow where constant emotional interruption exists. This doesn't mean pretending you never cared. It doesn't mean suppressing your emotions or acting cold. Feel your pain. Cry if you need to. Talk to trusted friends and write your thoughts in a journal. Process everything honestly. But don't make the mistake of placing your healing in the hands of the person who caused the pain in the first place. There is incredible strength in waking up one day and deciding, I no longer need to explain why I deserve better. Silence also creates space. Space to hear your own thoughts again. For weeks or months, your mind may have been filled with questions about him. What is he doing? Does he miss me? Is he happier without me? But once the silence begins, those questions slowly transform. They become questions about you instead. What do I want from life? What dreams did I neglect? Who was I before this heartbreak? How can I become stronger than I was yesterday? That shift is where real transformation starts. Ironically, people often begin to notice your absence only after you've stopped trying to make yourself noticed. When your energy is no longer spent trying to earn someone's attention, it naturally returns to the one person who has deserved it all along. Remember, silence isn't about playing games or manipulating emotions. It's about refusing to participate in a cycle that keeps you emotionally trapped. Your calm becomes louder than arguments. Your peace becomes more convincing than explanations. Your absence speaks more clearly than another desperate conversation ever could. The day you stop explaining yourself is the day you begin hearing your own worth again. After you've stopped chasing closure and learned the strength of silence, you arrive at the most important turning point of your journey. This is where everything changes, because now the question is no longer, how do I make him regret hurting me? The question becomes, who am I becoming because of what happened? And that question has the power to transform your entire life. The greatest mistake people make after heartbreak is believing they have to prove something to the person who left. They post pictures hoping he'll notice. They force themselves into new relationships just to make him jealous. They pretend to be happy while secretly checking if he's watching. But that's not transformation, that's performance. And performances eventually ends. Real change happens when nobody is watching. Think about the version of yourself before this pain. Maybe you had dreams that you pushed aside. Maybe you stopped taking care of your health because life became overwhelming. Maybe you forgot the hobbies that once made you feel alive. Maybe your confidence slowly disappeared because you spent so much time trying to be enough for someone who never fully appreciated you. Now, imagine using all the energy you once spent worrying about him to rebuild yourself instead. Go to the gym because your body deserves strength, not because you want him to notice your transformation. Learn a new skill because your future matters, not because you hope he'll regret losing you. Build your career because financial independence creates confidence that no relationship can ever replace. Read books that challenge your thinking. Travel if you can. Reconnect with family. Spend time with friends who remind you of your value. Become so invested in your own growth that your life starts expanding far beyond the limits of one painful relationship. This is where something incredible happens. Confidence built from genuine self-improvement feels completely different from confidence built on attention. Attention fades. Validation disappears. Compliments come and go. But when you know you've become stronger through discipline, resilience, And personal growth, nobody can take that away from you. Ironically, people are naturally drawn to those who have stopped seeking approval. There's a quiet confidence in someone who walks into a room without needing everyone to admire them. There's something magnetic about a person who smiles because they're genuinely at peace, not because they're trying to send a message to someone from their past. And if one day he sees this new version of you, he'll notice something far more powerful than a different hairstyle, better clothes, or a happier social media profile. He'll notice your energy. He'll notice that you're no longer waiting for his attention. He'll realize that the person he thought would always be there has grown into someone whose life no longer revolves around him. But here's the part many people miss. Don't build this version of yourself for his regret. Build it because you deserve to meet the strongest version of yourself. If his regret becomes your goal, you're still allowing him to control your motivation. Your growth should belong to you alone. There is no greater victory than looking in the mirror months from now and realizing that the person staring back is wiser, calmer, healthier, more confident, and more fulfilled than the person who was once shattered by heartbreak. At that moment, you won't just have survived the pain. You'll have used it as the foundation for a completely new life. And that's when the greatest revenge quietly becomes something much bigger. It becomes your greatest transformation. There comes a moment in every healing journey when anger begins to lose its grip. At first, you think revenge means making him feel the same pain he caused you. You imagine him crying over your absence, struggling to replace you, or finally realizing the mistake he made. Those thoughts are understandable because pain naturally wants justice. But if you stay in that place too long, you'll discover something painful. Anger keeps you emotionally connected to the very person you're trying to escape. That's why the most powerful stage of healing is not hatred. It's indifference. Indifference doesn't mean pretending the relationship never mattered. It doesn't erase the memories or deny the love you once felt. It simply means that your emotions are no longer controlled by someone else's actions. Their choices stop determining whether you have a good day or a bad one. Their opinion no longer defines your confidence. Their attention is no longer something you crave. This is where real freedoms begin. Think about it. When you're angry, you're still emotionally invested. Every time you replay old arguments in your head, every time you imagine what you should have said, every time you hope life teaches him a lesson, he is still occupying space in your mind. Even though he may not know it, your emotional energy is still tied to him. But indifference quietly cuts those invisible chains. One day you'll hear his name, and your heart won't race. You'll see an old picture, and instead of feeling crushed, you'll simply remember a chapter that has ended. You'll realize that your peace has become stronger than your pain. That doesn't happen overnight, but every small decision you make to focus on yourself, instead of him, moves you closer to that place. Ironically, this is often the point when regret has the greatest chance to appear. Not because you planned it, but because people sometimes notice what they've lost only after they no longer have access to it. When someone expects you to keep reaching out, and you don't, when they expect you to keep waiting, and you move forward, when they expect to remain the center of your emotional world, and they discover you've built a life that no longer revolves around them, it can force them to confront the consequences of their choices. But here's the truth you must never forget. You cannot control whether someone regrets hurting you. Some people will regret it deeply. Others may never acknowledge the damage they caused. If your healing depends on their remorse, you've simply traded one emotional prison for another. Your freedom cannot depend on someone else's realization. Instead, measure your progress differently. Don't ask, "Does he miss me?" Ask, "Am I finally sleeping peacefully again?" Don't ask, "Is he regretting losing me?" Ask, "Am I becoming happier without needing his approval?" Don't ask, "Has karma caught up with him?" Ask, "Have I become the kind of person who no longer carries bitterness wherever I go?" Those questions lead you toward lasting peace instead of endless waiting. The beautiful thing about indifference is that it isn't forced. You don't wake up one morning and decide to stop caring. It happens naturally as your life becomes fuller. As you invest in your goals, your friendships, your health, your dreams, and your future, your past slowly loses its emotional weight. What once felt like the center of your world becomes just one experience that taught you what you deserve. And that is the quiet victory no one can ever take away from you. The day his actions stop controlling your emotions is the day you truly reclaim your life. As your life begins to change, you'll notice something remarkable. The questions that once consumed you slowly disappear. You stop wondering why he didn't choose you. You stop imagining what you could have done differently. Instead, your attention shifts towards something far more valuable, creating a future that no longer depends on anyone else's approval. This is where the deepest form of healing begins, because the greatest revenge isn't watching someone regret losing you. It's building a life so meaningful that their opinion no longer determines your happiness. Too many people unknowingly place their lives on hold after heartbreak. They postpone dreams until they feel better. They wait for an apology before allowing themselves to smile again. They tell themselves they'll be happy once justice is served, once karma arrives, or once the person who hurt them finally understands their mistake. But every day spent waiting is another day surrendered to the past. You deserve more than a life spent waiting. Think about everything you've always wanted to become. Maybe you've dreamed of starting a business, changing careers, learning another language, traveling to places you've never seen, writing a book, improving your health, strengthening your faith, or simply becoming someone who wakes up excited for each new day. Those dreams were never supposed to disappear because one person failed to appreciate you. In fact, pain has a strange way of revealing what truly matters. It strips away illusions. It forces you to discover strengths you never knew you possessed. It reminds you that your identity is much bigger than one relationship. The relationship may have ended, but your story didn't. The happiest people are not those who have never experienced heartbreak. They are often the ones who refuse to let heartbreak become the final chapter of their lives. They made a decision that many others never make. They stopped asking life to give back what they lost and started creating something even greater. This doesn't mean pretending everything is perfect. Some days will still be difficult. Some memories will still hurt. Healing is rarely a straight line. But every small step you take toward your future is another reminder that your life belongs to you. Build routines that make you proud. Surround yourself with people who celebrate your growth instead of feeding your pain. Protect your peace as carefully as you once protected that relationship. Learn to enjoy your own company. Discover passions that remind you how much life still has to offer. Every accomplishment, no matter how small, becomes another brick in the foundation of a stronger version of yourself. And here's the beautiful irony. When you stop trying to impress the person who hurt you, you naturally become more impressive. Confidence that grows from purpose has a completely different energy than confidence built from seeking validation. People notice it. Opportunities find it. Healthy relationships are attracted to it. But by then, something inside you has already changed. You no longer need someone else's approval to feel complete. Whether he regrets his decision or not eventually becomes irrelevant, because your happiness is no longer connected to his choices. You've stopped measuring your worth by who stayed or who left. You've started measuring it by the person you're becoming every single day. That is a freedom no one can take away. Never let one person's inability to recognize your value convince you to stop investing in yourself. Your future is too important to be held hostage by your past. The greatest revenge is creating a life so fulfilling that you never need anyone's permission to enjoy it. If you've followed this journey from the beginning, you've probably noticed something unexpected. At first, your only goal may have been to make him regret hurting you. You wanted him to feel the loss, to realize your value, and to understand the pain he caused. But now you've reached a place where something far more powerful has happened. You have changed. And that is the greatest victory of all. One of life's biggest ironies is that regret often arrives too late. Sometimes people don't appreciate loyalty until they experience loneliness. They don't value kindness until they encounter selfishness. They don't recognize what they had until it no longer belongs to them. It happens more often than we realize. But here's the part no one talks about. By the time that regret arrives, the strongest people have already moved on. Imagine this moment. Months or even years have passed. You've rebuilt your confidence. You've invested in your health, your career, your dreams, your friendships, and your peace. The person who once cried themselves to sleep is now smiling without forcing it. You've stopped measuring your life by what you lost and started appreciating everything you've gained. Then one day, he reaches out. Maybe it's a message saying he misses you. Maybe it's a phone call. Maybe it's an unexpected encounter where you see the surprise in his eyes because you're no longer the same person he left behind years ago. That moment was all you wanted, but now something remarkable happens. You don't feel the overwhelming excitement you imagine. You don't feel the desperate need to hear an apology. You don't feel the urge to prove anything. Instead, you feel calm. You feel grateful for how far you've come. You realize that while he may have returned, the version of you that once needed him no longer exists. That is what true healing looks like. Real revenge isn't rejecting someone just to hurt them back. It isn't making them jealous. It isn't making them suffer the way you suffered. Real victory is reaching a point where your happiness no longer depends on what they do next. Whether he regrets it or not, you continue living. Whether he apologizes or stays silent, you continue growing. Whether he comes back or never looks back, your future remains bright because it no longer depends on his decisions. That is freedom. Some people confuse forgiveness with weakness, but forgiveness, when you choose it, isn't about excusing someone's behavior. It's about refusing to let their actions occupy your heart forever. And even if forgiveness takes time, your goal should always be freedom. You don't owe anyone another chance, but you do owe yourself a peaceful future. Remember this whenever you're tempted to look backward. The person who hurt you introduced you to pain, but they also unknowingly introduced you to your own strength. Without that experience, you may never have discovered how resilient, capable, and courageous you truly are. So don't let your story end with betrayal. Let it continue with transformation. Don't let your identity be built around the person who walked away. Build it around the person you chose to become after they did. Because the greatest revenge was never about changing his heart. It was always about reclaiming your own. And when that day comes, when you wake up genuinely happy, fully at peace, and completely confident, you'll realize that his regret is no longer your reward, your new life is.